The multi-billion-dollar settlement in the House versus the NCAA case that's supposed to bring revenue sharing into college sports has hit a snag. Federal Judge Claudia Wilken on Thursday night said she would not grant preliminary approval to the settlement and told the NCAA and the attorneys representing the plaintiffs essentially to go back to the drawing board. And there were a couple issues. We bring in Pete Nakos, On3 national reporter, to discuss this. And Pete, what were Claudia Wilken's issues with this settlement?
Yeah, Thursday night was definitely a blow to the NCAA side of this settlement that would reshape college sports. And Judge Claudia Wilken out in California, her biggest problem, ironically, came down to NIL collectives and boosters, the things that have really driven the college sports landscape in the last 3 years. So specifically, she's in support of them and not putting a cap on them, which this settlement would do. And it's definitely a blow to the NCAA. NCAA President Charlie Baker actually just came out with a letter in the last 45 minutes saying that last night didn't go as they hoped. So it's not back to the drawing board by any means, but this part of the settlement, which the NCAA was really hammering home that they wanted in, is definitely going to need reworked. And they're supposed to meet in 3 weeks, and we'll have to see how that goes.
So basically what was going to happen is you had a couple of different things. You had the money that will go toward former athletes who feel like they should have been able to take part in NIL. And that's the $2.8 billion part of the settlement. Yeah. And that comes from the NCAA and the schools. You also had, for the next 10 years, a revenue sharing plan that allows schools to spend up to, I believe, $22.8 million a year. Yeah. And that would go up every year. But what the NCAA and the schools wanted to do with this is have basically go back to old school NCAA enforcement where boosters couldn't pay players beyond what they consider quote actual NIL. So like real legitimate marketing deals, ad deals. Well, Pete, I don't understand why they can't seem to get this part straight, because it seems like they've lost every time in court.
Yep.
Going back 10 years, basically every time they try to unilaterally impose a restriction on somebody else's earning power, they get smacked down by the court.
Right.
What would be the difference here?
The difference here, Andy, is that if this goes to trial and they lose in a court case, I mean, they're looking at upwards of $20 billion in back damages, right? So 2.77 sounds a whole lot better right now than $20 billion, and that's the motivation behind getting the settlement done, and that's why they've arrived at this point. And now, I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say the settlement is somewhat in danger. It's not like off the rails or anything like that, but last night did not go well. And as you and I have seen in the last 5-6 months, they lost the court case in West Virginia over the transfer portal. And then they lost another one in Tennessee when it came to recruiting and NIL. And now they have this one. And it's a big decision now for the NCAA membership and President Charlie Baker. And they're going to need to talk to everyone, but they really wanted this settlement to almost bring in another new era of college sports. And now it's really going to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, I think if they'd have watched a little show called Andy Staples On3, they might have understood that this wasn't going to work, because this is the same problem over and over. I want to read you an exchange between one of the NCAA attorneys and Claudia Wilken, because I thought it was really interesting. This is during the hearing on Thursday night. So Rakesh Killaru, one of the NCAA attorneys, goes, "Our position is pay for play is prohibited." And they're discussing the revenue sharing aspect of this settlement, Pete. And Judge Wilken goes, "Well, but in this House settlement, if it's approved, you'll be explicitly paying for play or allowing schools to pay for play. So that no pay for play thing is kind of not going to be there anymore, is it?" Wilken said. And Killaru says, "There's still going to be a prohibition on pay for play, and there's discretion for schools to make payments as they see fit under the new regime." And Wilken basically just kind of throws up her hands and is like, "And that won't be pay for play?" There's also
a piece Thursday night too where the plaintiff's attorney, right, they're representing the athletes seeking claims, tried to compare a third party NIL collective to Nike, and the judge was not about that. She said And then she went on to talk about how can you tell if a booster is right, if they support school or not. And that, I mean, Andy, that just took a shot at 100 years of NCAA, jurisdiction.
Yeah, I think they've got to come to grips with the fact that they're not going to be able to police this the way they want to unless they collectively bargain it, which they really don't want to do because they don't want to make the players employees. And I think that's kind of where the rubber meets the road here. And this is yet another example of what happens when NCAA college sports land, because I don't want to just lump the NCAA in here. It's the schools and the conferences. The conferences are also defendants in this case. And it's what happens when college sports land meets the real world, and someone from the real world like Claudia Wilken, who just uses normal common sense, is like, you're going to give $22 million to the athletes for being athletes.
Right.
That's paying them for playing. Like, there's no distinction there. So
and then
it is really funny.
And then you can't cap these boosters and third parties for how much they want to spend on athletes either. I mean, that's a huge point that she's making.
Yeah, and so one of the things that this settlement was supposed to do is it was supposed to create a new enforcement arm essentially for the NCAA and a system that would allow them to determine what is quote unquote real NIL and what isn't. And what a federal judge is going to say, and what probably a different plaintiff's attorney, not the ones that stand to make a fortune off this case, are going to say is, well, who's to say what real NIL is? Who's to say what market value is? I believe market value is whatever somebody wants to pay you.
Exactly. And the other thing too is the settlement includes language, right? You have a deal over $600, it has to go to a clearinghouse. Well, that seems awfully a lot to trying to control the free market to me. And I could see that also really coming into focus with Judge Wilken and what she does and doesn't want in this suit and what she will or will not approve.
So what happens next? Because I saw Ross Dellinger from Yahoo quoted an unnamed school president who basically said, let's take this sucker to trial. Let's back up a little. They were settling because they were pretty sure they were going to lose at trial.
Exactly.
What happens if they do?
If they do go to trial, I mean, then
you're if they lose.
I mean, it really seemed like from what we saw yesterday in that preliminary approval hearing that the judge was not on the NCAA side when it came to some things. And I mean, if they do go to the courtroom, if I was a betting man on this one, I would definitely go for the plaintiffs over the NCAA. And if the NCAA loses, well, then they're facing up to $20 billion in back damages. And I think some things that we haven't talked about yet in terms of maybe a revamped revenue sharing, all these enforcement mechanisms that the NCAA's hoped for would go out the window, I'm pretty sure. So I talked to the plaintiff attorney, Jeffrey Kessler, last night, and he was calling me right after he got out of that Zoom meeting. And I said, so how serious are you about taking this thing to court? He said, I'm 100% serious. So they're ready to get a court date if the NCAA is going to hold up the settlement.
Jeffrey Kessler, by the way, the person who helped the NFL usher in free agency. Help is not the right word. He represented the NFL players, and they won, and free agency happened. And so he's pretty experienced on this front, not the person you really want to be going up against. And Dave's here in the chat. They're trying to limit people who aren't in the case. And that's another thing that Claudia Wilken point out. I'm glad Dave's was here to point that out, because this is this class settling this case, but it purports to create the rules for the next 10 years of college athletes who are not part of this. And that's another piece.
Yeah, that was another touching point last night. The judge really asked for some the plaintiff attorneys, right? Kessler and Steve Berman pointed out at Sedona Prince and stuff as their current athletes, but that was something that the judge seemed a little questionable of.
Go Black 45 in the chat. The beautiful thing is that all these fancy legal minds that the NCAA have access to did not see this as a trap to bring them to trial. I actually don't think it was. I think the plaintiffs' attorneys stood to make a fortune off of this, and also from a legal precedent standpoint, from a just where their place is in the history of college sports, they were fine with that. They were fine with ushering in the era of schools paying players. That would have been a big skin on their wall.
Sure.
I've got a comment from Ellipsis Athletics that I want to post because I want to try to help people understand why this keeps happening. So Ellipsis Athletics says all full scholarship student athletes should receive trust funds along with their athletic scholarships, and their trust should be funded by endorsements along with their Alston Awards. It's pretty simple. It's actually not, because here's the problem. If a bunch of purported competitors get together and do what you're suggesting, which is limit how much somebody else, a non-employee, by the way, can make by, using their name, image, and likeness.
Right.
Well, that's against the law in this country.
Andy, it's just the reinforcement that we needed to know that, man, the NCAA is still facing an uphill climb. And what no one talked about last night is how the NCAA still needs to go to Congress for a lot of these things to happen properly. So just another reminder of, even when there's a settlement on the table and things seem to be coming together, the NCAA still has quite a bit to do.
Yep. And just a reminder, when the NCAA goes to court and they try to make those arguments with a straight face to a judge who doesn't come from college sports land and lives in the world of common sense, this is what happens. So it's not totally back to the drawing board, but it's definitely not full speed ahead either. We will see what happens. And next few weeks are going to be very interesting, Pete.
They should be fun.